Hey everyone, welcome back to our podcast. I am Kelly Birmingham. This is a 25-year look back, a retrospective look back across the spectrum in my 25 plus year career working in the field of ABA, working with children and adults with autism and different developmental disabilities. And as always, I have my partner in crime, Jen Lucero, mom to Dylan and Ethan. Hey, Jen.
Hey, Kelly.
Hello.
Hello.
Today we're going to be a little technical. And it's funny because I get a lot of feedback from people that listen to the podcast, mostly through SitePro when they're getting CEUs. And the comments that I get are always, love the realness, love the rawness, love that when you take technical language and explain it in an easy way to understand, but also hearing the parent's perspective. So we're getting great feedback on that. So today we're going to dive into the topic of extinction. And before we get started, I want to just give a shout out to our sponsor, SitePro. SitePro offers a wide range of engaging and practical continuing educations developed by BCBAs for BCBAs. And I have a bunch myself. I have several on there, including toileting and sexuality, all topics we've talked about on this podcast, safety and social skills. You can visit their website at sitepro.com to see the complete CEU library, including all of our podcasts, which are for free, provided for free for CEUs for BCBAs. So not only are we educating and sharing, but people are getting the CEUs they need. So that's cool.
That's great.
All right, so technical today. We're going to talk about extinction. Now, you and I have kind of danced around this topic before in the past, particularly because I know you have said extinction doesn't work for Dylan.
Sometimes yes, sometimes no, but majority no.
Right? So what made me want to talk about this podcast was I was actually listening to another podcast. And that podcast was talking about, they were saying they never use extinction practices ever, and they're against extinction. And it made me think, I don't think people fully understand this concept. So let's talk it through. And it might feel too simple for some BCBAs. But we have a lot of parents that listen, and we have a lot of behavior therapists that listen. And so I want to break it down in its complexity to its simplest form, and we can use some of maybe Dylan's behaviors and your responses to that. So, all right. So first of all, the whole concept of extinction means it's the discontinuing of providing reinforcement for behavior that was previously reinforced. That's the technical term, right? That's Shannon Penrod and her jargon of the day term, right? Where she's so good at it. The whole concept is the reason you would use extinction is because you want a response to stop, okay? You don't want it to occur anymore. So it's usually some type of problematic behavior, right? Other ways to get rid of problem behavior is what we call punishment. So let's take an example of I'm going to start off with a young child, because this is where I think a lot of the differences and nuances. When you think of a toddler, think of Dylan as a young toddler. And maybe he was screaming, right? And screaming, right? Okay, when he was always screaming. And you wanted him to stop screaming. Okay. Punishment would mean we do something aversive, something that's aversive that makes a child stop screaming, right? That's positive punishment. The other thing we can do is take away something, right? To stop something. So the concept of extinction is you're not putting something aversive on that child or taking away something that they had previously. The concept of extinction is you're just not reinforcing it anymore. So when Dylan was a toddler, and the idea being that because that behavior doesn't come into contact with reinforcement, it goes, oh, I'm not getting reinforced anymore. I guess I'll stop. So the theory. Okay. So when we look at problem behavior, there's 4 functions. Let's start off with the screaming, which is problem behavior or challenging behavior, or just you're annoyed your kid is screaming. And the reason they're doing it is to get your attention. And I think the number one problem with extinction is they always call it just ignore. But extinction is for all 4 of the functions. So the first one is a little toddler is screaming to get your attention, right? Have you ever purposely ignored that behavior to make it stop coming into contact with your attention?
Of course, but a lot of times it would backfire.
Tell me why.
Because he just, our kids are smart
Mm-hmm.
and they pick up quickly that, you're trying to like ignore them because you think they'll just give up or get tired. But I found that it would actually, if I did it that way, it would actually escalate it, and he would get closer to me and the volume would go up.
Yep.
You just wouldn't let it go.
Yeah.
In theory, maybe that works for some people, but like it did not work for us.
And I think so. So what happens when you stop reinforcing a behavior is it likely results in what we call an extinction burst, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which basically means a child tries harder and harder to get that attention because like screaming used to get attention. Now it's not. So they try harder and harder. So like the magnitude of the behavior gets bigger and greater. The frequency might increase because the child is trying to get into contact with the reinforcement, which is your attention. Right?
Yes.
Right. And so what happens, I think we all think, is people say we never use extinction because frankly, for family members, it's really hard to use extinction, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we also know that children on the spectrum persist sometimes with greater strength than maybe a neurotypical child.
No, for sure. I
right?
mean, I remember when Dylan would be screaming or having, a combo of just like physical behaviors. I remember when you're saying the screaming thing.
Yep.
He had a thing when he was really young, probably 3 or 4, that he would decide he didn't want to get in the car seat.
Yeah, I remember.
And he would just scream, but also he would just like a combo of wiggling his body and trying to wedge him in there and get the seatbelt on. And the strength of, I mean, he's always been big, for his age, but the strength, even of this little human being, like when he's in this moment, it was amazing. I mean, there were a couple of times at the time, my husband, I had to call him and like be like, I need help. I can't literally get him in the car. I mean, and it seems so crazy now to think about it, because I'm like, I am a grown woman. This is like a 3-year-old, but seriously, I couldn't do it.
So interesting. This is where our jargon gets so technical. You needed to put him in the car seat. He tried to get out, but you always got him in that car seat, right?
Yeah. I mean, and I don't think there was really a time that I had to have, my husband come home. I thought in my head I did, but then it would always happen. But it was not pretty.
So that's actually a form of extinction called escape extinction. And that is why I wanted to talk about this, because Dylan was screaming and crying and doing that to get out of getting in the car seat. But you put him in the car seat. Why? Because he had to be safe when he was in the car. So that's actually a form of extinction, meaning you didn't allow his screaming and crying to get him out of being in the car seat. And that's why I wanted that. Like, I think that's where it's fun to play around with this and to talk to you as a parent, because as a behavior analyst, I'm like, she didn't let him get away with it. And I think when it comes to matters of safety, parents are going to use extinction techniques, right?
When I did, yeah, absolutely. Sorry. When I did that, I never actually, I guess I was ignoring in the way of, I wasn't verbally saying anything back to him. But I was having to physically like get him in. But I would look away. I wouldn't say anything, but I was determined. I would literally be like sweaty sometimes after, but it was going to happen one way or another.
Exactly. And that's called escape extinction. And that's when it's like, you're not going to let his behavior get him out of being in the car. And you also smartly, because you're so smart, knew not to provide additional attention in case that behavior was also to get your attention. So that's where I think the extinction part is so fun, because There are times we all do it that we just don't know it. But I remember, and this is where people talk about ABA is bad. I remember when I first was in this field in the 90s, I was taught to not let kids get up from a table until they'd completed their task, right? And we'd hold them in their chair. You know, I was like 26 years old. I didn't know any better. And you hold them in their chair and not let them get away from the table until they finished, I don't know, a writing task or a matching task. And I know now, like, that's terrible. Like, there are so many better ways I can do it, but that's what people think when they think escape extinction. But when we're thinking about matters of safety, like, you've got to be in this car seat or you've got to put your seatbelt on, right? Then
go ahead.
That is a form of extinction, because eventually Dylan got in the car seat without problem behavior, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you're saying, because I remember they used to, very beginning, not you, but maybe schools used to do that with Dylan, like, or other students, because I used to work for a school district, so I used to see it. I guess my point, especially of having another child, well, I just don't think that's effective or smart, but also forcing someone to sit. You wouldn't do that with a neurotypical child. Like, no one would sit there with Ethan and do that.
Right.
My other kid, right?
Right. Exactly.
I mean, is that still something that's practiced, or is that like a old school, like, practice, you know?
That's part of the argument, because there are, I mean, I don't know what everyone's doing, but the reason I was listening to this podcast and the conversation was about, some people say we never do it, right? And I'm thinking of, like, getting the child in the car seat. You're doing it. But then there are some people who say it's a valid strategy. We're going to do it no matter what. And that's why I want to talk about you as a parent and a clinician, where we can say, like, yeah, like, if Dylan is trying to get out of, like, think about, like, any unsafe behavior, you're going to not allow unsafe behavior to occur, right? But just to sit and do work, no, you wouldn't do that to any child, right?
No.
And so the first one we talked about was problem behavior, or annoying behavior as a parent that's maintained by attention. We know that increases and escalates Dylan's behavior, and we know it doesn't work. Ethan figured that out, right? And but when it comes to getting in a car seat, we're going to do it, baby. The other form of extinction is behavior that's maintained by automatic reinforcement. That's like self-stimulatory behavior, right? Now, some people would say, like, you're not going to tell Dylan, you're not going to block him from engaging in stimulatory behavior, right?
No.
Right?
especially at home.
Right?
Yeah. It's like, when, you know, he's had a long day. It's like sometimes me coming home, unwinding and having a glass of wine. For Dylan, it's getting out all his, like, figurines and guys and, like, spinning out for a little while, because he's worked hard to keep it together all day. So who cares? And, well, I mean, in my opinion.
Agreed. And I think, but remember early on, I remember you and I talking about, should we let him line things up? Right? Should we let him line things up? What if we don't let him line things up? I used to think that way, right? Like, block all of these self-stimulatory behavior. I've had parents tell me, don't let my child hand flap because it's weird and looks embarrassing, right? And so
I have a total positive lineup thing, and you'll remember it, and we all cried, and my mom, because we did let him line things up, and we didn't realize that he totally knew the alphabet.
Right.
And he had letters, like the letters with the magnets, like, that you put on the fridge, and he did the whole alphabet because I let him line it up. And we then realized that he totally knew the alphabet and in order.
I totally remember that.
In a strange way, there could be positive things with it.
Exactly. I remember when you told me that. It was like, oh my God, he lined up the entire alphabet. And that's exactly right. And that's where I think clinicians and parents have to talk together, right? Because you don't care if he lines up. We now know that's the way he organizes and soothes and calms himself, right? And so in people, the sort of, like, autistic adults against ABA, that's one of their major criticisms is, don't stop me from self-stimulatory behavior. It's how I cope,
Mm-hmm.
Now, on the other side of it, I work with some adults with severe behavior whose self-stimulatory hurts them.
Mm-hmm.
I have a young man whose self-stimulatory behavior involves biting himself,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I am trying to go through an analysis to figure out an alternate activity that would provide him with the same comfort and feedback, but that doesn't hurt him. And so sometimes what we do is we do some response blocking so he doesn't hurt himself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I always want to say, like, if Dylan's self-stimulatory behavior, has he ever engaged in self-stimulatory behavior that injured himself? I don't recall.
I think the only thing, but okay, I'm gonna say yes and no.
Okay.
I would have thought it was.
Yep.
So, but he used to, I remember, bonk your head,
Yes.
hit himself on the head or hit himself on the stomach. And I, at that time, thought he was stimming, but it actually was an indication that there was a medical issue going on.
I remember.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep.
Melanie. But others would perceive that as that he was doing,
yep,
self-stimulatory behavior. And it was an indicator that something else was going on.
Well, that's the thing with self-stimulatory behavior, is it's a behavior that's automatically reinforced, right? The action makes your body feel good. When folks on the spectrum hit themselves in the head, it's almost always to mitigate pain. Not always, but often, like if you hit yourself, it temporarily releases pain from the headache. And so that's going to take me down. Let's go down that next path. That the problem with extinction, meaning, and I bet you did this with Dylan in the car seat, is if you don't give a replacement response or activity for the child or adult to engage in place of the problem behavior way, then that's where it falters. In other words, if you just put Dylan in the car seat, he'll eventually ride in the car seat. But I bet as a mom, you also gave him things for sitting in the car seat, and here, have this and eat this and play with this, and I'm going to play music and I'm going to talk to you, right?
Yep, absolutely. I mean, as soon as you said that, I thought, okay, once the car was moving, because he hated, as you'll remember this, hated red lights. He went in movement. So once I actually squeezed him in there and I was like running in, jumping in the car seat. I would take specific routes that I knew that I would take the freeway instead of like, streets, because thinking, okay, the more movement I have, crank up the radio.
Yep.
Put music, Beatles on at the time of what he loved, and probably at that time give him a toy or two to hold that. Yep. Like he loved animals, like figurines, so probably that, and that is
yeah, you reinforced him for sitting in the car seat.
Yeah, of course.
Yep. And so that's why you're so good at this. You're like basically a BCBA. But is the analysis of, if you're going to remove reinforcement for behavior, meaning not allow Dylan to escape the car seat, but you've also added in a positive reinforcement for the sitting in the car seat, then that makes it so that Dylan learned to get in the car and ride in the car without problem.
I found for me too, during all these situations, the less that I like verbally said stuff, this just is what works with Dylan, the better. Like, get in, turn the music up, hand him things, but not say too much. Don't just say what just happened. Like, don't dwell on it and just like move on.
Yep.
Because I learned that because, in the beginning, you're like, oh, you need to sit in the car seat. Oh, you need to stop, blah, 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 blah. Or you try to totally ignore it, but not just verbally ignore it, like ignore everything, which that doesn't work either. So yeah, you have to have kind of build a strategy,
Yes.
And then obviously it's all trial and error too. But sometimes things work, and then you think you got it down, and then you have to adjust it too.
Absolutely. And so I think for takeaway for BCBAs listening is, don't say you never use Extinction, because a lot of times Extinction is a great choice for safety behaviors, right? And another one I think of is toothbrushing. Lots of kids try to get out of brushing their teeth, right? And they're trying to, no, and crying and carrying on. I don't want to brush my teeth. But you don't let them, because they have to brush their teeth, right? So instead you guide them and don't let their problem behavior allow them to get out of brushing their teeth, but then you reinforce the teeth brushing, just like the car seat experience. And so there are times when we are going to have kids do what they need to do for health and safety, but it always has to be paired with a really strong, rich reinforcement schedule.
Absolutely.
Right? And there are other times when extinction, like ignoring a behavior, screaming and crying, is going to lead to such problem behavior that it's not healthy or safe for the kid or you. And so that's when you would say, no, I'm not going to do that, because it's not safe now for us, right? Like if you ignored Dylan and just ignored, I could see him coming after you.
Right? Yeah.
Taking you out.
Yeah. And it's happened quite recently.
Yeah. So in that instance, never would anyone should say, like, ignore that behavior. And most of the time, the other part is this problem behaviors are almost always due to a lack of communication. Right?
And for
ability to communicate, rather.
Yeah. And there's usually, whether it's stress for him of something like coming up that maybe is not a preferred activity, or if there's a medical issue going on, is when I see the big increases of
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
in talking about replacement skills, you did this when Dylan, once you figured out Dylan hitting his head was, we'll call it automatically maintained, because it was pain relief for his headache, and he started hitting himself. You started to teach him to ask for Dr. Mike, remember?
Yeah, absolutely. That was the indicator that I knew there was like something, that was going wrong for him. But in Dylan's, I think this is true also with some of the, stemming stuff, is a lot of times too, like Dylan is very sensory oriented. And so it's a combo where it wasn't just like, I'm hitting my head for pain, but he also loves, like, deep pressure and squeezes and, hugs and stuff. That's a comfort zone for him, and it just releases a lot, like it, good energy for him.
Yes.
So it's interesting, because it's hard sometimes with our kids to know, like, and I am into that. Like, I love the fact that, I would be so bummed if he was a kid that wouldn't let you touch him or kiss him or anything. But also, and I would, even with some of his service providers, obviously in an appropriate way, encourage it, because, it was something he actually seemed to need, whether even like noogies, like, and what's interesting about Dylan is not him just getting it. Like, he wants to give people like noogies, and
he's giving me one.
Yeah, because I think for him, like, that is something that's helping him. So I think he likes to also, like, that's a way that he can communicate with somebody. Yeah.
Right. And also, you just plugging along, being a mom, doing the, whatever you think is right. You taught him how to access that kind of feeling in a way that, like, was meaningful for him and you, right?
Yeah.
By allowing him to do it and teaching him and then letting him to reciprocate it back. Like, you turned an automatically reinforced behavior into a connection for the two of you and for him and other people.
Definitely.
And that's why I get so excited, because, like, as BCBAs, we only see the clinical terms, right? And like what that means. And so, to say like, oh, that's automatically reinforced and it's a problem, right? And it's only a problem if it feels like a problem. Right? And like Dylan, like, the joke is he was the mayor of the campus, right?
Yeah.
But he liked to go up and squeeze and touch. Sometimes he did it inappropriately. And that,
And we had to work on that.
exactly. And instead of
Yeah.
like saying, no, you can't do it, it was like, and put it on Extinction, it was shaped into a better way to go about and do it.
Yeah, we just had a situation that was funny, but well, I mean, for example, Dylan's like jokingly is always he still says kiss your teacher and stuff like that. And he'd be like, well, you can kiss grandma or you can kiss mom, but like you got to kiss on the cheek and stuff like that. We I was at an event last week for work at Tippecanoe, and it was local. So I joked that it was in Tustin. So I told everybody I'm bringing the mayor of Tustin with me, which is Dylan. And we got there, and he knew everybody. And there's a woman there that works for the sheriff's department, my friend Gail, and he just loves her because he feels good energy. He knows
Right.
she's cool and accepts him. And it was funny because just randomly when we were leaving, he tried to walk up and kiss her.
Oh,
But he went for the cheek, and I was like, "Whoa, dude!" But it was just interesting because, like in the way, like he felt comfortable, but did what he thought was like the appropriate way. It wasn't like he tried to give her a big smooch on the lips, but he kind of fake did it, but didn't actually do it. Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
But it was just interesting. But that's been a big training.
Right. Right.
Because he did used to, when he was young, go up and try to give people a big kiss on the lips.
He did. And it was never me. It was always my younger staff.
Yeah, but it wasn't like creepy or anything.
No.
I mean, it probably would be now because he's 23, but when you're 6, you can get away with these things.
But the whole point of this is you never said, no, you can't do it, and just like put it on Extinction. You took that and like taught it in ways that were appropriate for him and for you and meaningful.
And it wasn't
all
just
this is.
anybody either, like
Yeah.
you said. I mean, I guess a good way about it is Stone's always a pretty good judge of character, and I think he senses like who he can, do that with, and not, or there's people he's going to show you the door, so
Right.
it goes one extreme to the other. But I think, like you're saying, I think for Dylan, just in general, like throughout, like all of his, goals and services and just life skills, the biggest challenge and I guess fear as a parent for me has always been safety.
Right.
And so I think this topic is so important because the safety aspect of it is like the key.
That's right. Yep. Thanks, Jen. This was a fun way to talk about such a terrible technical term.
Absolutely.
Thanks, everyone, for listening to our podcast. Have a great day.
You too.